All right, welcome everybody to the third Meet the Sponsor webinar. Today we have a couple of really special guests. We have Al Rondon from Coca-Cola, who I met 5 or 6 years ago at a Mellow Yellow race. He was part of the group that was running the Mellow Yellow program for NHRA drag racing. And we also have Mitchell DeYoung, multi-time, 12-time, I believe, track and real world racing champion and 11-time sim esports champion. And Mitchell is joining us from Germany. So thank you for joining in, Mitch. I really appreciate it. Very cool. Tammy,
Thanks for having me.
Al? Say hi to Al real quick. Al, you're joining us from Atlanta, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Right on. All right. So first off, as everybody knows, these webinars are intended to help racers understand what brands want from sponsorship. And they're a way to learn from racers who have sponsors and who've been sponsored by some very respectable brands on how they did it and what they do to keep those sponsorships going. So today I'm going to go backwards, and I'm going to do it just for the sake of time because Mitchell is in Germany, and I want to ask Mitchell, what time is it there, and why are you in Germany? Can you tell the audience what you're doing over there?
Sure, yeah. It is currently 2:30 a.m., so a little bit into the night, or early, depending on your definition. But yeah, no, came over here, I would say a week after the new year. We have a big esports competition on the road side of things that kind of required me to be out here for that, logistically, for time zone specific things, and also preparation for these events because they're extremely competitive. So that's kind of why I'm here right now. We're coming to our final week of that championship. So, it's just been a little bit different than the US, which I've lived all my life. So, yeah.
Right on. That's great. And Al's tuning in from Atlanta. Are you at home right now, Al? Are you actually physically in Atlanta, or are you on the road? I know you travel a lot pre-COVID, so I'm not sure what the COVID schedule's like.
Yeah, since March of last year, we've been working remotely. So I've been working from home, sequestered the basement away from the kids, and it is now my domain. Good to see you, Joe. Yeah.
I'm in my office now. I turned my little man studio into an office, and now it's a set. We'll see if it works. But hey, you know what, Al? One thing I never asked you is how long have you been with Coca-Cola?
So I've been with Coke for 26 years.
I thought so. Okay, long time. And then how many years of that time, or how long of that time were you involved with sponsorships at various capacities? I know most recently it was Mellow Yellow. Was there something before Mellow Yellow?
So I really wasn't involved in sponsorships per se. I've been in sports marketing for the last 9 years. Obviously, that is a world where you touch sponsorships, but really throughout my marketing years with Coca-Cola since 2005, I've touched or have been working with folks that have been either seeking sponsorship or we seek some sponsorship relationships with folks. So very familiar, and really for the group, a lot of this conversation started when Alex and I met, probably more like 8 years ago, sitting at a PF Chang's and just getting some stories about, the world of sponsors, or the world of, racing, and how racers are always looking for sponsorship dollars, and really looking at it from this other end. So we've had a lot of healthy discussions over some delicious drinks, I would say.
Yeah. Man, I miss those days. I can't wait for it all to start up again.
Me too.
So there was this time, Al, when was this? Maybe, I'm going to guess your memory's way better than mine. And I've always told you that 3 or 4 years ago, you and I were in 29 Palms, California, in the Upper Mojave in the desert. And we were going on a razor ride all around Joshua Tree Park. But beforehand, we had to stop in to Stater Brothers there, and we were loading up on some groceries and some drinks. Tell us what happened. This is a fun story. I like this one.
Yeah, so actually we were getting ready to kick off the season up in Pomona. And so I snuck a little few-day trip in early. Alex invited me out, and Alex and Tammy and I spent some time out there in the desert. And when we stocked up for some supplies, we were in the grocery aisle at Estata Brothers. I was wearing a Mellow Yellow shirt. No NHRA paraphernalia, nothing else that would identify the drag racing series. And we pull around to the aisle. I had a case of Mellow Yellow in the shopping cart, and a guy stops me and says, "Hey," looks at my shirt, points at my shirt, and says, "Hey, you going to the drags?" And I said, "But yeah, I'll be there later this week." And I turned to Alex and I said, when I first started in that role, one of my goals was to make that brand synonymous with drag racing. And to me, that was a level that we had achieved because we had no other branding. He saw the logo, he put one on one together, and to me, that was justification for the amount of effort and dollars that we spent as a company to associate that brand with that sport and those fans.
I was blown away by that because so I'm out getting some food and Al was getting the drinks, and I think he was carrying a case of Mellow Yellow. I had some whatever we were eating, and I walk up to Al, and suddenly another man walks up, obviously a desert local, someone who lived in town, and he looks at us and he looks at Al and he goes, "You guys going to the drags?" And I was like, how the hell did he know that? Here it is, 2 hours away in Pomona, the drag races, and this guy associated the logo of Mellow Yellow with the drag races. I thought that was phenomenal. That was a turning point for me in understanding how the true activation and branding of sponsorships works. So kudos. That was awesome. That was really cool. So Coca-Cola, I read during COVID, that a lot of brands, obviously Coca-Cola distributes through a lot of restaurants, and restaurants closed down during COVID. And so Coca-Cola made some adjustments as well. You had 200 brands, I know, at the beginning of the pandemic. Some were pared back and some were consolidated. How many brands are there now? Is it just over 100, or do you even know?
Yeah, obviously being a global company, there are brands that are specific to certain countries, but the company did take an opportunity. This is highly publicized, that they're looking at all the brands and they want to make sure that that they've got scale, right? So you've got Coca-Cola, you've got Sprite, Diet Coke. Those are brands that are global brands, right? And so it was a lot of the smaller regional brands that they were really looking at. So I think what you heard the chairman say is that they were trying to get to about 100 brands that we would have in the company. So there's certainly scaling back some of those. So if you were a Tab lover, we're shedding some tears because I know that there's a lot of fans of that brand that won't be able to get that anymore. But you understand there's so much that goes into that decision. Yeah. Everything from supply chain to production to warehousing to retailer space on in the shelf. The retailer's box is not expanding. In fact, we're getting more and more competition with different brands, so the space is shrinking. So you got to be really, really smart with the space that you have to put the best brands that are going to sell and create, the biggest impact for your business in that space.
So COVID changed the way a lot of businesses operate. And one of the big things that COVID changed was, at least it brought to my awareness, was, Monster Energy, one of the brands that I believe Coca-Cola owns 17% of, record profits, record sales, record revenue, stock prices at all-time high, and there were no events. No athletes were in any events. This is after NASCAR, but there was no NASCAR at the time, no Supercross, but still the brand did very well, clearly, because of the sponsorships and the marketing that led up to COVID. How has COVID changed how some of the brands at Coca-Cola are activating through sponsorships, or has that been a discussion? Or do you find yourself doing different things with sponsorships now, having learned from a year of not having any events, or is the brands, how did the different brands, if the racers on this show want to reach out to brands of Coca-Cola, is the timing right, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, listen, I've said this many times. You know, you are a brand. As a racer, you're a brand. I know Joe. Is a brand, right? And you can't just send a sponsorship request to a company blindly without having done some research. Understand what the company's looking for, what that brand is specifically looking for. You talked about the many brands that we have. Well, each brand manager is charged with connecting that brand to who their core consumer is, right? So you as a brand need to position yourself to say, understand what your need is, Mr. Company, Mr. Brand, and here's what I can do to help you achieve your goal. So much of the time, I think the thought process is, I need to get sponsorship so I can continue to race. I'd love it if people would think about, you know, what can I do to help this company, right? It's just like going out looking for a job. You can't just go in there and say, hey, I want you to pay me. So here's what I can do to contribute to your company, right? Because each of the folks that have sponsorships are ambassadors for that brand or that company, right? So they're paying you to represent them. So what is it that about you that aligns with who their target audience is or who they're representing? So I think that goes a long way, whether you're looking at a Fortune 500 company or you're looking for a local company. Really do the research, take the time, find out what it is that company is looking to achieve, and find out a way that you can help them, bridge that. And sorry to cut you off, Al, but there's a lot of times that you may have a connection with a customer that this company wants to start trading with, right, or start selling through. That's a B2B relationship, right? So you can help them connect that dot, and I think there's certain ways that you as a brand or you as a person could help this company achieve some of their goals.
So question then is, let's pretend I'm an amateur racer. I am looking for money, and obviously Coca-Cola is one of the world's largest sponsors. So it's clear that Coca-Cola might have a budget, maybe perhaps through some of the different brands. How would I know if my brand, my personal brand, aligns with the brand of one of the beverages or the drinks? Is there any easy way for a racer to look that up or determine who the demographic is of, let's say, Powerade versus Coca-Cola versus Dasani versus Mellow Yellow? Is there an easy way to do that, or is it more common sense?
There's no easy way to do that. People just send it through, and or they may see your connection through LinkedIn and say, "Oh, I want to send it to him," and politely ask if he could forward it to the right person who is a decision maker. I would tell you that research is key, and there's tons of places out that you can go to find out what the brand stands for, what's the brand's objectives. And that's not just our brands. I'm talking about any company that you're looking to do, especially a big company that has a lot of that. But I think, certainly LinkedIn is a great way to find out some people and ask the question, hey, I just like to know a little bit more about your brand, what your objectives are, and I'd love to find a way that I could help you achieve those objectives.
Right. So then a question is, if I'm a racer and I want to send Coca-Cola a deck to get to know somebody, do I send a deck to each of the different brands, or is there a consolidated place? Some websites have a submit your sponsorship proposal here or your request here. You obviously, like every one of my other guests, get a lot of decks every year. What makes you forward it to the right department, or is it a one size fits all? Do you get a generic to Coca-Cola, please place me into whatever brand you think is appropriate? What works best? What's more effective?
I think really and I can't, and I'm not advocating this is the way to do that, but I would tell you that Certainly, there are portals. The company has a portal where you can submit things in, and committees review these things, these decisions. But connect with a brand manager. If you can find a brand manager, find somebody that you can talk to. It's always better to have an internal contact that can help you navigate, because as you can imagine, there's hundreds and thousands of these applications. I've seen thousands of them in my time, and a lot of times it's the timing. People are looking for a sponsorship of a particular event or something that's happening 6 months. These big companies are planning out a year to year and a half in advance, and those budgets are decided and pretty secure at that point. So you got to get out and have a strategy.
Okay, so that's good. What you just said is, now when COVID hit, things changed a little bit, and now there were no physical races this past year, and we have a lot of racers who are watching the show. And when events are canceled, are there other things that racers can do to get visibility? And is that how a brand like Coca-Cola would look at it? Is, okay, we're still sponsoring you, but perhaps not at the races. Now we'll sponsor you to go get visibility, let's say through sim racing. And obviously Mitchell's online. I'll get to him in a second. I'll ask him what some of his sponsors look for when he's sim racing and racing online. But do you work with the race teams to find another outlet for visibility and for them to activate and market on the brand's behalf?
Yeah, I think certainly without the experiential marketing that we were not able to do because of the COVID restrictions, we had to pivot and lean on some other tools. Ambassadors doing things through social media, bringing your brand to life that way. That certainly was one way. I would challenge anyone to think about some creative ways that are non-typical, right? If you're not on the track competing, how do you continue to be an ambassador for that brand?
Agreed. And so then I'll transition over to Mitchell then. Thanks, Al. Mitchell, you are sitting in Germany racing, getting up at 2:30 in the morning and going online, and you're racing for, is your primary sponsor VRS? Is it Virtual Racing School right now?
Correct. Yeah. VRS.
And what is it that they're looking for with your participation in online racing?
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. So VRS, Virtual Racing School, for those who don't know, it's essentially an online coaching platform for all of sim racing. So, you have the track days where you could have an instructor come out and give you a full day course. We can do the same online, and we have a full web interface where we can fully coach people through that. But more than just that, kind of getting into the integration and working together more as a group rather than just a shallow sponsor gives money relationship. We help test hardware and stuff like that is coming on the horizon, and doing little things like that, which kind of benefits all parties. We get to have nice hardware. Obviously, we get to race and have good equipment and be able to race in whatever we want, whilst also helping out Virtual Racing School develop their hardware and their coaching service and everything like that.
Excellent. Do you find sim racing is competitive as actual track racing, or how would you sort of classify the differences and the similarities between real road racing at a track versus sim racing online through esports?
It's definitely a bit different. I would say they both have their positives in different ways. In sim racing terms, the competition wise, it's incredible. Just think basically all you need is a wheel and pedals, a computer, and a monitor to go drive. So there's a very low barrier to get into sim racing, as well as there's no limit on practice time. So essentially you can work as hard as you want to get to the level that you believe you can be, and get everything out of yourself. So it really raises the bar high. Whereas real racing, you have to be wise with how you're spending the money, taking care of equipment. Obviously, we have a reset button in sim racing, so you crash the car, you can easily fix that. So it's just a different dynamic. But that's kind of why I love it. The sim racing side is just super competitive. Me myself, I'm a super competitive person. Like, I like to think I'm pretty easygoing, but man, something about competition just like really drives me. And it's just different in both types. I love both. But you do have the different dynamic between the two.
So I didn't mention this. You guys don't know I was going to say this, but in the last webinar, Cole came on. My son Cole, for those of you who were not part of the last webinar, my son Cole he raced trophy carts back in 2006, I believe, 2006 and 7. And that's how we met the DeYoungs. I met Mitchell then because Cole and Mitchell raced against each other. And Cole would come back, Dad, I won. It's like, no, that blonde-haired kid just lapped you. You actually came in last. And that was always Mitchell. And back in those days, you were already multi-time go-kart champion, and you became the trophy cart champion. You were tuning. I remember you were in the pits tuning your trophy cart and your equipment yourself. Has that given you an advantage? Do you still do that to this day? Like when you won X Games Gold for rally, did you tune your rally car? And then does that give you an advantage in sim racing is to have known how to tune your own equipment and work on your own equipment?
Oh, definitely. I'm a huge believer in kind of knowing the stuff that you get to race. In rallycross, I would say in the more latter years where you're in kind of the top level class, you can't really get so hands-on anymore. You have a big crew that kind of handles all that for you. But in the ones before that, when it's still kind of grassroots and you don't have a huge operation around you, I love that. Just being able to work on your stuff. I think it's a huge help when you're in the car as well. Just kind of knowing what's going wrong out on the track if something happens. And as well on the sim racing side, like I think it's huge mechanically to know kind of what's happening where, in reality in a sim, you're just kind of clicking buttons on a screen to find an optimal setup or something like that. If you can kind of put the two together and kind of paint the whole picture, it just is a huge help to figure out those little tweaks that make a big difference. And I think on the other side of things, like sim racing also helped me in terms of real racing, being able to try stuff on the sim, feel that it actually did something that I would expect it to, and then I could actually use that feedback and when I drive the real car to make those changes too.
So you're in a unique situation, and I can say this because I've been involved with your program since we met back in '06, I guess, and I was watching you with trophy carts. And your situation is unique because I think you're one of the first racers that I've ever met where sponsors approach him. You really didn't have to go out and do that sponsor hunt per se, like a lot of others. They came to you, and they, at least when you were doing track racing and rally and what were you, the super, no, I was going to say super light, but it was the buggy class that Lucas Oil Off-Road Series, all these different series that you were in, sponsors came to you and asked you to represent them. Was it the same with sim racing, or did you have to go seek your sim sponsors?
I think that was the kind of cool thing as well with sim racing. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, there's not like a super high barrier to get into it. So obviously you get into it, you start putting the work and you can show kind of what your skills are in that. And, you can kind of attract attention that way just by performing, which is really cool. It's hard to do nowadays in real racing, of course. So being able to still have that freedom is super cool. It's kind of the same thing that you mentioned that I experienced kind of in my real racing, which is a super cool thing. Looking back on it, especially. Yeah, it just that's kind of a nice thing about sim racing.
Excellent. And so Al, I want to ask you with With the no events last year, is Coca-Cola now looking to have any of their teams and racers or any sponsored properties make more of a transition online? Or is that one of the deciding factors in choosing what to look for in a deck? When someone sends you a deck and says, here's my plan for 2021, and it's all track, is it as good as if it was half track and half online, or some combination of the two? Or are you looking for more than just the same old thing?
I would tell you that 2021 is probably not something that, any brand is looking at. They're looking, as I mentioned earlier, they're looking at 2022. So I think, and certainly we can see that things are improving, and, we'll be back, stadiums, even in some of the states that were more on a lockdown are allowing people to come in. So I would anticipate that, brands are going to get back to activating, on site and things like that. One thing I would tell you, racers know there's a race fan, right? Look for the brands that are trying to connect with that race fan. You mentioned that, Mitchell was being sought after. Well, it's because as a brand, if you're looking to connect with that certain sport, whether it's gymnastics, basketball, as a brand manager, you're going to say, what's the best fit for that I could invest in and have he or she be an ambassador. Those are the types of things that companies are looking to do. So they're doing their research on the end, and there's, a number of companies that do a lot of ranking and things like that. And that ranking certainly takes into effect what kind of social following, how active that person is socially. So it's going to be more than just what they do, on the field or at the track. Right. What's this person's total brand? How active are they in social? Because that is something that companies are really looking to get, because they want that voice, they want that reach.
Yeah, just in the fact that Coca-Cola now has not only the NASCAR series, but the e-NASCAR series by Coca-Cola. That says a lot right there. You just mentioned something. Obviously, we're already first quarter 2021. Budgets are closed for traditional fiscal cycles. What is Coca-Cola's fiscal year end, and when do you make the budget decisions?
So calendar year is what the fiscal year is. It follows that. And then, decisions are, there's not a hard deadline on decisions, but I would tell you that, we work through our bottling partners. We work with our customers. Everyone has different timelines for locking in at plans, marketing plans. So I would tell you that it's ever changing, but certainly, mid-year, those decisions for the following year are being made.
And I suspect that's the same with all beverage companies. Okay, Tammy's trying to signal me.
Hey, I've got a question in the chat room for Al.
Okay.
It says, what would be your dream B2B connection for any of your brands?
Can you guys hear that? Can you hear Tammy? Is her microphone okay?
I heard something about a dream.
Okay, Tammy, try that microphone on to your left. See if this helps, Al. There was a question in the chat room for you, Al. That was.
All right, can you hear me now, Al?
Yeah. Yep.
It says, what would be your dream B2B connection for any of your brands?
I would say that, is there a customer that currently does not sell our products? That would be a big opportunity for the company to secure. So, that certainly goes a long way, helping somebody connect. I've had a lot of conversations with folks that were connected at a high level, the senior executive level of a company that we weren't doing business with. Those are the opportunities you can bring to somebody and say, hey, can we invest those dollars in there? The marketing dollars are not infinite, right? They're very finite, and they're spread among a number of channels. media is a big drain on that. So you've got to find out what kind of business you can bring to help justify the expense.
That's interesting. So when you say customer, it doesn't necessarily have to be a retail customer. It could be a new restaurant chain or a new, fast food that's opening up that does not yet carry the product.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative. If Joe Morrison came to me and said, "Hey, I can get you in at Bobby's Pizza and Subs," well, that's great. Thank you, Joe. But I still can't afford your $90 million Top Fuel dragster. So yeah, I mean, I joke because I know Joe and he's a great guy. But I would tell you, yes, those are the creative ways. B2B, I think, is certainly something that companies are always looking for on how can they get in through your connection or through something that you're doing that can help them get something that they can't get. Right.
And then how do you look at overseas markets versus the domestic market when you're looking at your sponsorships? When let's say a NHRA drag racer wants to send Coca-Cola a deck, does it matter that there are no races overseas, or is it just going to be very specific to that demographic? And I know that you've told me once that Coca-Cola, it's the work proud male. I don't know if that applies to the Mellow Yellow brand as well, but assuming that's a domestic United States work proud male.
I mean, I can't really speak to international decisions. I can tell you from my experience, we were looking at what the impact was on our North America business.
Okay.
Because that's the audience that we were trying to target.
So keep it to the United States. That makes sense. Was that another question that popped up, Tammy, or was that the one that you just read?
Right.
That's good. All right, cool. Hey, Mitchell. Mitchell there?
Yes, sir.
All right. So when you're racing online, and there's something that you do that I think is fascinating to me, but you're in a race, and I know that at a track race, it's hyper-focused. You have to be 100% focused on what you're doing. How is it? Because I'm just doing this myself now. This is my third ever webinar, and I'm live, and I have people like holding up signs that things are going wrong, and there's text coming across the screen, and I'm trying to remember what to say. How on earth do you communicate and talk with the chat room people, because you're racing and you're reading the text messages and the chats at the same time, holding conversations while you're racing? I don't get it, because I don't know how to do that. Help me out here. I am completely lost at how you maintain that type of control. I need some help.
It's certainly a bit different. Obviously, you can't do that in the real races too often, but that's a cool opportunity that you get kind of with the esports stuff. Yeah, just being able to broadcast your races and having a different kind of view other than just from the typical social media style. You have a more one-on-one direct contact with someone you're following or something like that. That's why I really like live streaming, especially on the races. You have to do a little bit of task switching during the race to do that. For the bigger races, we tend to keep the chat off so that we aren't too distracted for the ones that we need to perform on. But on the ones that are a little less serious, it's a cool opportunity that you get to kind of do. So it's a lot to manage. Obviously, you're getting the feel for that now. So
it is a lot to manage. It's very stressful, man. It's completely stressful. I got too much going on. Tammy's holding up signs. It's like it's upside down. You can't read it. Not really, but I think we have another question from the chat room being signaled.
It says,
let's see.
Has fan engagement been easy with esports? You live stream and interact with fans. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, but I think it's a little bit.
I think that's for Mitchell then, huh?
Yeah, Mitchell.
Fan engagement. Can you read that again?
Do you need me to read it, Mitchell? Or?
I think I got it. Yeah, like I said, the live streaming is a huge plus, I would say, because you have that more personal connection. obviously it's a little bit different as well than real racing because it's a lot virtual things on screen. You don't really have those cool car shots all the time that you get to have at a racetrack, or when you're in the sim and racing, it's a lot of the same atmosphere. So it's a little bit harder to get kind of those cool shots and things like that. But like I said, on the plus side, you have the live streaming, and you have to get a bit creative with kind of the other social work that you do. But it is a controlled environment, and you can set up really cool things. So just a little bit different style. I guess it's the same with a lot of things. So you just have to adapt to the conditions.
And then how was it that how did you get your sponsors for sim racing? Was it different from getting sponsors in track racing?
A little bit different. For me, I kind of started off just by, racing and, improving my skills kind of on track, doing well, and eventually getting picked up by an organization, a team. And the team does a lot of the work and kind of acquiring partnerships and stuff like that. Of course, there's personal deals too that you make as well, but I would say it's a little bit different. It's more team and organization kind of focused in kind of the esports realm of things. I think you'll see that among like all games, not just kind of particularly sim racing. So it's a different kind of style compared to I would say real racing, where it's you're doing a lot for getting just your car kind of to the track and to the races. So yeah, just a little bit different.
Interesting. I could see that. Yeah. And then you're racing on a simulator someone else built, I presume, versus one that your family builds.
Yep, that's right. So back at home, we built mine and build them for a few other people. And here now it's a lot of the virtual racing school, the VRS stuff that we have pretty much a full kitted out rig. If I was in the other room right now, right outside the window, we have a separate kind of guest house with like 7 15 to $20,000 simulators in it for each of us. So it's really cool. I mean, it's a lot of money for something like that, but that's kind of the sim racing kind of peak at it. So
are there as many simulators there in that guest house as you have in your house? Because I know last I was there, you had at least 5.
Yeah, we had quite a bit there at the time. I want to say I haven't been there obviously in a few months, but I think there's only 2 or 3 there now. So still a lot. Obviously, I'd only race in one at a time. So
when are you returning to the United States?
We don't really have a set date yet. I think the plan was to kind of finish this Porsche season out, which ends this weekend actually, and we'll kind of figure it out from there. It's always a little tricky with the COVID restrictions and making sure everyone's on the same page so we're not stepping on anyone's toes with events coming up. So you just have to be pretty good about planning.
I'm pretty sure the Europeans are on far more strict lockdown than we are here in the United States.
Yep, a little bit.
I had some questions come through. Some people are texting me questions. It doesn't help because I don't have my glasses on. I can't really see it very well. But Al, what are the plans for Coca-Cola next year? What on a broad scale should any racer who's attending this, listening, and hopeful perhaps that they can send someone a Coca-Cola deck, is it a good time to do so, or is Coca-Cola, like Monster and another brand I've spoken to, looking at more major restructuring of their sponsorships and their sports marketing? I know a lot of brands are taking another look at how they do things.
Yeah. So that's true for us as well. I know they're constantly evaluating, and working on asset strategies on how they participate in sponsorships, both globally, nationally. I mentioned earlier that we operate with a network of bottlers who also are business owners. They own the franchise in the area, so they're business investors as well. So a lot of times the bottlers have sponsorships. They invest as well in certain sports. things like that. What I would encourage you guys is just don't think about Coca-Cola. Think about what I'm saying in a much broader sense, and just take it hopefully as what I hope it is, to as valuable advice on how to think about your approach and how you can help these companies achieve their objectives. That's going to go a long way, whether it's my company, whether it's any other company. Your point, or to answer your question, Alex, with regards to sponsorships, yes, the company is always evaluating that investment. They're big investments. I mean, think about the company has a global sponsorship of the Olympics, and a global sponsorship of FIFA. So there's a lot of money that gets tied up in these sponsorships. So they're constantly evaluating how these sponsorships are working for them. That's this asset review that I was telling you about, where they look at it and say, how is it delivering on the overall objectives? So, but all the things that I was saying, it's not necessarily related necessarily to Coke. It's just in my experience and talking to people like yourself and other companies. These are the things that I think would fare best for your audience, for racers, to say, how can you as a brand help these brands connect not only with the fans there in the sport, but help them deliver on their objectives. If you can approach it with the right amount of research, and you can deliver what these companies are looking to do, I would hope that the companies would evaluate and consider your proposals.
Right. Well, a lot of this is, the webinar is designed to help racers understand what brands want, and some brands are unique, some are the same. There's some foundations and some fundamentals that apply to everybody. Correct fiscal year, timing. Make sure you time your approach. Make sure you send the deck or some initial correspondence to the right person. I've seen many times where racers will approach the wrong person and jump right into a pitch, and that's a guy that works at a trade show. That's not the guy that's going to make the decision. So there are some fundamentals that truly apply, I think, in all cases. But you see some brands like or Full Throttle, I should say, that seem to have a strong affinity towards racing because Full Throttle, boom, accelerate. But at the same time, the racers will also say, gee, how do I approach that? And then and they send one deck to all the different companies. I've seen the same deck go to Red Bull, Monster, Full Throttle, NOS. I haven't seen any decks that go to Coca-Cola. I think you've seen that. So certainly when I say Coca-Cola, I'm talking about the parent organization with all the hundreds of brands. And I think that what you're offering in terms of the overall advice is phenomenal. And it's, these guys need to listen and understand all brands are unique, but all brands do have some common elements. Don't send me a deck if it's the wrong fiscal year. Don't send me a deck if it's for a brand that I'm not involved with. Don't send me a deck if I already have a pro racer in the series that is already, kicking butt and doing very well for us. So I guess a lot of the racers and the questions that I get from the racers on the show is, gee, what's my first step, or is it even worth approaching this particular brand versus another? Or should I focus my energy on smaller mom pop companies that I have room to grow with?
Yeah, to me, it's, do the research, find out what the brands are trying to get to. Find the brands that are trying to target the race audience, the race fans. What are the brands that are trying to do that? You talk about Monster, Red Bull, and all those. They're involved in racing. They obviously have an affinity to the sport and want to attract that race fan. What are other brands that are trying to get to that race fan? Yes. Then you guys can make the connection that way, because you can hopefully deliver them something that some of the other drivers aren't able to do.
And so one of the lessons that I teach in the workshop goes into market to the man in the moment. A race fan, there's no such thing as, you don't grow up and say, hey, I'm going to be a race fan. You do grow up and say, I want to be a doctor, a teacher. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an accountant. But very few people say, I want to be a race fan. So The race fan can be a teacher, doctor, construction worker, an accountant. The racing is the common denominator that brands can use to reach somebody despite who they are in real life or in their actual profession. So it is that common denominator where you can connect with people. Is, they could be middle-aged, they could be old, they could be young, they could be in a foreign country. But if they like racing, you're going to connect to them through the racing and use the racing and use your personality. And as you said earlier, your brand as a racer to connect with the brand of the sponsor so that they're similar. Because not too many sponsors are looking to sponsor, teacher racers or racers who like teachers who like racing or lawyers who like racing. It's market to the man in the moment. I guess a better way to say that is in the morning I get up and I walk outside and I'm a single guy and I grab a cup of coffee and then Tammy comes out. Suddenly I'm a husband. Our kids wake up. Now I'm a father. If I have to drive the kids to school, I'm a chauffeur. Maybe after school, I coach a little league or I help out. Now I'm a coach. Then I come back home at night and I'm a dad again and a father again. Well, if you're Starbucks Coffee, don't market to me while I'm teaching or coaching Little League. Market to me while I'm having coffee in the morning. If you're a mattress company, market to me when I'm thinking about going to bed at night. So the timing is appropriate. Racing gives brands the opportunity to time a message through the racing that could be appropriate for that brand. Hopefully that made sense. It made more sense in my book.
And I think we kind of touched on it, but I'll just read it. It says, are the bottlers more likely to sponsor than the parent company? So the individual brands.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if your approach is more a regional approach within that territory of the bottler, and you can help them deliver on something that's important to them, I would say that they would certainly that would be of value to them, right? And there's been a number of instances where the local bottler may support teams. Now, at the end of the day, the company owns the brands, right? But there are certain bottlers that are willing to invest, if it makes sense for them on their business. And one of the things you talked about, Alex, before was, small company, large company. It's all relative, right? A small company's marketing dollars is, from a percentage standpoint, is going to be the same as a large company. So it's all relative. It's, how are they maximizing the investment dollar?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I like that point because to a small company, the investment in sponsorship usually has a lot more weight or is more value and important to them, the success or the failure of that sponsorship. Bigger companies are diversified, small companies aren't. Guys, I didn't realize we've already popped up on the 55-minute mark. So this hour went faster than all the others combined. We're going to answer a few questions, and then if there are any questions, we'll answer those. But then I'd like to ask both Mitchell and Al, what's next? Maybe we'll start with Mitchell. Mitchell, I realize it's early in the morning for you, but you're going to go to bed and then get up, and then what is next on your agenda?
Next up for me, my next race is on Saturday, in the evening, about morning time for most of you guys in the US. But after that, a couple days later, we'll have the NASCAR Coca-Cola series on iRacing. So that'll be around this time that the race actually starts. So we have to do some schedule switching during the day. Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much it. Daily grind, as everyone knows, just like a normal job for me.
So NASCAR Coca-Cola series, cool. Al, how about yourself? What's next on your schedule?
So I now lead our NASCAR partnership management. So we're focused on the month of May. We've got the Coca-Cola 600 there on May 30th. It's a big race for us. It's a entitlement race, and so we're getting into the depths of the NASCAR schedule. So it's good to see fans back in the stands. I know everybody on this call is anxious to get back to some semblance of normalcy. So, as a fan myself, I'm happy to see fans in the stands.
Well, I'm looking forward to another PF Chang outing in Las Vegas. So we're going to be watching that schedule very closely.
Yeah.
Guys, are there any last minute questions before we lose our time here? Or are we good? Tammy? It takes her a little while because the broken leg, the broken knee. So she's hopping over to read the chat room. Uh-oh.
Somebody wrote, if Al's available for coffee or a Coke somewhere in Cobb County, he'll buy.
You're gonna get a lot of those, Al. I warned you. I warned you about this. It was funny. Eric Siebold from Permatex, while we were on the webinar a couple of weeks ago, people were connecting with him on LinkedIn while we were on the webinar. So they're very proactive.
Did Tammy, did the question come over at Cobb County?
Yeah, Cobb County.
Okay, because that's where I live. I live in Cobb County.
All right.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, well, I'm dying to know who that standee is, Ron. I can't see.
That was from Ron Stebbins.
Ron's joined
Okay.
a couple of the webinars. I'm in touch with Ron. I can put you two in touch if you need.
Great.
I can do that.
Okay, got another question.
Yep.
It says, oh, this is everybody. Hope to see Al in Atlanta for a social outing, not for sponsorship. LOL.
I'll be at the NHRA drags in Commerce as a fan. So Joe, hope to see you out there. I'm thrilled that you're out in the dragster and know that I'm rooting for you, for my comfort of my couch.
Right on. Right on. Well, thank you, Al. Thank you, Mitchell. Mitchell, especially for staying up so late or getting up early. I'm not sure which it was. This is great. Al, your words of wisdom are always amazing, and your memories is incredible, which we've talked about that. That hopefully we'll create many more memories now at the races now that you're on the NASCAR side. It's starting to get interesting. Should be really fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I hope it was valuable to everybody.
It will be, absolutely. Just knowing that it's real, that there's not this formal process you have to go through. It's very logical and commonsensical. I think that helps a lot. And it's good to hear over and over that sponsorships are not hard to achieve. They're very logical. And if a racer approaches it with some common sense, looking at the business objectives of the brands that they're approaching, that usually leads to a greater degree of success than just randomly shotgunning decks to everybody who has a fancy title that says marketing or sponsorship. So I think just to hear it over and over, it really does set the point in. Thanks, everyone.
Think about it the next time somebody comes and rings your doorbell and wants to sell something. Think about that as you think through your strategy, right?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Al. That's a real good point. Think of the cold call. When someone cold calls you in the middle of dinner, or you get this, random email, are you going to automatically send them $100,000? Not until you know them. Not until you know what they're all about, of course.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mitchell. Thanks, Al.